Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
And welcome to Yogananda podcast. Today we're going to be looking at the penultimate part of chapter 16 of the Autobiography of Yogi, looking at it line by line. And we'll cover up to the footnote. So we're going to read really right up to the end of the chapter. And then we're going to leave the footnote of 19 because it's so substantial. We're going to do a whole episode on it ourselves separately. So any readers that want to read along can do so up to the footnote with us. And we're without Lauren today, so Lauren fortunately couldn't make it. But we'll cover for her as best we can. And just a quick note, Priyank, you're gallivanting around the world right now. Tell us really quickly, if you would, whereabouts are you and what are you up to?
In India, I think Lauren might have mentioned it last week as well. So just attended the Kumbh Mela, which was very lovely.
Very nice.
Amazing.
I'm jealous. It only happens this properly once every 144 years, right?
This particular one, yeah.
This particular one. So the planetary alignments are particularly beneficial for us. So this episode's going to be released. We're giving away our dates here, but slightly after the initial start of it. But it goes on for 40 days, I believe, is the time. Right. So enjoy yourself over there, Priyank. And so to kick us off then, to look at the prior episode, what Lauren took us through last time, we were looking at the real amazing insight and the breakdown of the symbology in the Genesis part of the Bible by Sri Yukteswar to Mukunda. And he broke it down in several parts to Mukunda. And this is kind of good to go over and over, again and again, to help sink in really what it really means for us. But Sri Yukteswar said that really the tree of life in the Genesis is the human body, and the spinal cord is the upturned tree with man's hair as its roots, and the afferent and efferent nerves as the branches. The tree of the nervous system is it bears many enjoyable fruits that we can think of as the sensations of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So they're the fruits that it bears, and the many, rightfully indulge, but one is forbidden, and that is the apple that represents sex, and the serpent that is in Genesis. It represents coiled up spinal energy, stimulates the sex nerves. Adam being reason, Eve being feeling, and when emotion, the feeling, was overpowered by sex impulse, reason succumb. That was Adam succumb. We have all this symbology, and it all sorts of starts to make sense, rather than the literal interpretation. So we went through all of that in the last episode. So do check that out if you haven't checked that out. And we're going to continue really on the vein of the fallout of the eating of the apple, what it means of the fall of man, as it were, and the duality that comes from it. So we'll first look at this expression of full divinity that Sri Yukteswar was essentially breaking down for us, that God imbued in us in the initial creation of man. And he explicitly says that we were created from animal forms, but they were too crude themselves, the animals, to express full divinity, and that man is being given this unique potential for realizing its self, or to be self-realized through this 1,000-petal lotus in the brain. Frank.
Yeah, it's really should be a really inspiring few sets of words there, isn't it? Because we're really fortunate to have this human birth where we can have perception of this 1,000-petaled lotus, whereas, as is kind of a message inferred here, that animal forms are too crude, and we know that they mostly act on instinct and survival, whereas humans that do that don't really exemplify the best of humanity.
Potentially, as it says here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I think of the Genesis, I think of it as something that is very, I don't know, never came to me the idea that it would be inspiring me to be a very live a spiritual life. But then once you interpret it like this, it suddenly becomes this in a similar vein as like someone like when Guruji says we are so fortunate, or the three things you need to find God is like, one is you need a human body, second is you need to desire for God, and the third is you need to have a guru. And here he explains how blessed we are with this human body that can actually experience God.
Yeah, there's a bit of a hidden secret in here where it says, or not so secret, where Sri Yukteswar says the potentially omniscient thousand petal lotus. So he's stating quite plainly that it really takes some effort in order to utilize this uniquely given gift from God that we have, and that is my interpretation. Simply is, that is yoga. That is what we're trying to do. We're trying to fully realize this gift in the brain, or as Yogananda often refers to it as the cerebrospinal cortex. And so the awakened occult centers in the spine as well. This is what differentiates us from animals. And Sri Yukteswar goes on to say that the God or divine consciousness that's present within the first created pair, Adam and Eve, were counseled by this divine consciousness to enjoy all human sensibilities. And again, there's a little bit of interpretation required here. And my interpretation of this line was that he's simply saying that the counseling is this inward this inner voice that we all have through divine consciousness that speaks to us always through this reason, through the feeling that we have. So we need to go inward to be able to listen to the counseling. But instead, Adam and Eve, the reason and feeling went outward, went externally to the apple, try to go externally. So that's why I interpreted this. What did you guys think of that? Was there anything else there? Like,
It's in line with Guruji's teachings, where he says we have this energy in us and can be used for sex, but it can also be transmuted into higher energy and can be conducted to the higher centers of the spine, and that happens by pranayama meditation. So it kind of turns this kind of way that Genesis explains the tree of life into something that's compatible with the teachings of Yogananda.
And all the sensibilities except for one, as we mentioned in the previous episode, the sex sensations. And there's a footnote here to talk about the serpent, which represents sex force. That is, as said here in Genesis 3:1, more subtle than any beast of the field. So than any other sense of the body. And it's nice because if you watch many movies, one that really strikes me is The Hobbit. So if you're a fan of any of the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit films, The Hobbit has the Hobbit that lives in the Shire goes on this great adventure and eventually has to go to find the greatest gem of all and the treasure that's guarded by the greatest serpent of all, the dragon. And that is such a symbolic film that we all connect with through these kind of teachings, right? That your common man wouldn't really understand, but consciously, but subconsciously gets it. So it's so popular. And I think it's for this reason that we all understand that this is the adventure, the greatest adventure that we can all take. But it does take a lot of bravery, I think, courage to go through with it, as the little hobbit found out that the greatest value that he had was courage beyond everything else. Priyank.
Courage, willpower as well. But I hadn't thought of that actually. Really good comparison, and inspiration that Tolkien must have drawn from perhaps the East and the serpent, and protecting that. And yeah, that's really, really fascinating. But this whole concept of this is, you know, the one sensibility that we aren't allowed to indulge in, is tough, isn't it? I don't know how tough it is for women. Probably is tough, but for men, that's probably tougher for men, I reckon. But especially in teens and young adulthood, because it doesn't just say like, oh, when you're an adult and you got better control of your, you know, urges, you can do this. It says it's just full stop, isn't it? So even when we've, you know, reached a sexual age, these teachings apply to us. So potentially from the age of 14, 13, 14, you know, I don't know when, you know, you guys reach puberty, but that's pretty tough, isn't it? And if you wasted your energy in this way, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And, you know, in Christian parlance, it's like sin. You're essentially committing sin, aren't you? These are really tough teachings, and we obviously understand the science as to what that is, why that is, and how we can overcome it, as Mike kind of mentioned, in terms of transmuting it to the higher, you know, chakras, etc. And I've got a reading for that a bit later. But for a 13 or a 14-year-old to do that, that is that's quite something. That would be, well, from a 13-year-old version of me, that's, you know, beyond my capability.
It's a very good point, and I think actually reveals a little bit of the ineptness of our schooling education and our upbringing, you know, as a society, what broader society. I was never really exposed to these deep concepts, and I think as a kid, you know, I would give credit where credit's due. I think you can get this if you're schooled in it correctly, and it would really help to be able to manage the ideas and concepts that we're grappling with. If we could be exposed to this more gently, you know, at a younger age as we grow.
Yeah, Mike, you might as well go first. Sorry.
I just wanted to say that the notion of trying to limit sex in young people or in people in general, that, for example, I grew up in a Catholic background, is kind of, it goes in the right direction, but the Wapara Yuga thing is now that we don't take orders anymore if nobody explains us why, right? If people tell us do this and just for no reason, then we just don't do it anymore. We need to know the science behind it, and that's the great thing about Guruji. And the science is actually telling most people the opposite. The science is saying now, no, do as much as you want, it's fine, no worries, all good. And but because it hasn't reached that realm of metaphysical understanding yet, where it actually draws you away from the from your spiritual longing and into body consciousness. And it's also not great for your body, as Master writes in the lessons. It has multiple implications.
It's natural, they say, you know, it's fine as long as
yeah.
as long as there's, you know, consent and the age is right, all that stuff that we hear. But Guruji, you know, I mentioned that doing Kriya at the age of 13 was, for me, you know, not going to happen. But Guruji mentions there's other ways. So Mike mentioned about transmuting, you know, those impulses, and it's actually it must be so important for Guruji to harp on about this in significant detail in chapter 1, verse 1 of God Talks with Arjuna. And it's under the very long, you know, it's like 30 pages explanation of the verse. And it says, under soul's guidance, the sex impulse in man may also be transmuted into the creation on a purely spiritual plane of noble ideas, of artistic masterpieces, of soul revolutionizing books. They are blessed who are victorious over the sexual instinct, because suppression may only increase one's difficulties. Yoga teaches sublimation. And then a bit later, there's some other ways to do it and benefits, Mike.
The average person can be free of temptation by avoiding the company, environments, books, movies that stimulate sex thoughts. and by training the armies of self-control, by seeking good company, by proper diet, eating little or no meat, and taking more fresh fruit and vegetables, by exercising regularly, by engaging in creative activities such as art, invention, writing. Above all, by keeping the thoughts on the wonder, peace, and all-satisfying love of God. The insatiable desire for the pleasure of sex is transmuted by the divine love and ecstatic joy experienced in deep meditation.
So pretty cool, isn't it? So those are kind of like bite-sized ways that you can do it, but also implies that if you don't do those bite-sized chunks into gaining self-control, then actually you're on a downward trajectory, and that's probably what most of most teenagers are, aren't they? Because they don't do this stuff, and then they're not really taught about the disbenefits of indulging.
Yeah, so we have no choice, really. We can do one thing or the other, but we can't do none of the above, right? Because that energy is there. So it's basically Guruji encouraging us, do something creative, do something right. I mean, he talks about introspection a lot. I write in that sense a lot. I don't write any novels or anything, but it's great.
Not
great
yet.
to. I don't know if I will ever write novels, but it's great to just let it flow. Whatever comes to your mind, write it out, and that's a way of letting transmitting energy from one medium into another. You can imagine it like that, I think.
Nice. Thanks for that, Priyank. Very, very nice reading. And really the warning, as we mentioned ourselves, that Sri Yukteswar is given in the book, in the Autobiography of a Yogi here. He says that this was banned lest humanity enmesh itself in the inferior animal method of propagation. So we're going to look at that a little bit more, Priyank.
I've got this very vivid memory about this teaching here about the inferior method of propagation, because then the superior method would be to not have the physical act of, procreation. Because I remember once I was speaking to a nun from a very, very fundamentalist sect and meditative path, and she was, and I was a teenager, and I think I asked something about sex to this lady, and she said. She said, like with like piercing eyes, she said something along the lines that, well, if you realize your divine nature, she said, then just by gazing at someone that you love, and if your love is pure and it's divine, then procreation and conception of your progeny can happen just through a gaze. And I was very young, and it was such a vivid and such a like she said it with such force, and I thought, oh my gosh, I need to learn this. But thankfully I didn't learn it, because I didn't really want to have children. So imagine if I'd accidentally done that, then would have had children and not wanting them.
You're just avoiding all eye contact with your partner.
Yeah, poor Priyank. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll need to say that to my wife. Yeah, it is incredibly curious, because we looked at it in the previous episode, in the previous part of this chapter, that really this was indeed how God imbued us with that power to be able to have these immaculate conceptions, as it were, as what we would consider them to be, versus this inferior method of propagation that's more literal use of the sex organs. Pretty incredible revelation to my books when I first read that. Don't know about you guys, but Mike.
And I suspect that's also how it happens in the higher ages. When you're in the golden age, in the Satya Yuga, when people have full realization of God, they would not propagate using sex. They would use this method to procreate. And I wonder if that's one reason why Moses put an emphasis on the Genesis, because he came in a time that was a descending yuga. There was, and if I'm correct, it must have been descending Dwapara yuga. And so people must have at some point gone back from conceiving in a divine way to conceiving in a physical way.
So looking at the next part where this warning that Sri Yukteswar is highlighting to Mukunda, that we shouldn't give in to the bestial memories that Adam and Eve did, essentially. So it's a nod here that subconsciously we have these bestial memories from whence we were created. And really, just a note here, it is pretty exceptional that we are being told in the autobiography of Yogi such profound truths that we were created by God, separate to the animals, specifically for the reason for divine self-realization. And this really blew my mind when I first read it. So we are indeed separate from the animal kingdom, albeit we were taken from the animal kingdom. And so Sri Yukteswar does mention that here. And looking really at the fall of Adam and Eve from this state of heavenly joy, as Sri Yukteswar says, which is natural to the perfect original self as we were created by God. I thought this was pretty interesting. Don't know about you guys, but this outward flow of one's energies is what to material knowledge and to the senses is what really draws away our divine joy from being experienced. So it's essentially telling us, if you want to, have this divine joy, you have to go inward. It's the only way. So also more just great deep truths dropped in by Sri Yukteswar here, casually, as it were. And when this next line was fascinating to me, Sri Yukteswar says, when they knew that they were naked, their consciousness of immortality was lost. And so I'll go to you guys. Do you have thoughts on this? What do you think really Sri Yukteswar meant, or the interpretation of the words "they knew that they were naked" from the Bible meant?
I get the impression that when they identified with their sexuality and their sexual urges and sexual method of procreation, that's when they fell. And I get I think to myself how shy I am of my own nudity. I'm at Kumbh Mela, just did the dip, and one of the most famous things about the Kumbh Mela is there's these Naga Babas, these ascetics that live in the Himalayas, and most of them don't wear anything other than ash. They smear ash on their bodies, completely unaware of their lack of clothing. No shame. They don't have any embarrassment. This is just a body. But I don't know, probably speak of most of us, but we would be very shy to walk around completely naked. I know in some parts of Europe, they're very advanced and they don't have that sense of embarrassment. Yeah, but I am not in that space.
Yeah, we Germans are very advanced in that sense. But I think naked is a really interesting way to express this. Maybe, I don't know if people wear clothes when they're in the astral plane or how it works over there, but I think I was thinking similarly to what Priyank said, that that's basically their consciousness of the soul was lost and they identified with the body, which is basically what the state we're in now. And yeah, and then the heavenly kingdom is suddenly locked. You can't go in there anymore.
Indeed. So this is the turning point to which consciousness of immortality was lost. Quite a profound moment, really, for mankind. And God as God warned them, they had placed themselves, as Sri Yukteswar says, under the physical law by which bodily birth must be followed by bodily death. This is the greatest duality of them all.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's quite a shameful state to be in. Apparently, that's kind of a message inferred, isn't it? Where we have to endure birth and endure death, as we all do now. And this whole, from being conscious of their nudity or nakedness, and God talks about it in chapter 15, verse 1. This explains the pre-feeling of their being naked, and then what the consequences are in terms of this, death thing. So when Adam and Eve embraced each other with sexual desire, the serpentine or coiled up energy at the base of the spine, which either lifts man Godward or feeds his senses, stipulated the heretofore undeveloped sex nerves. From this agitation, the sex organs developed. Unto Adam also, to his wife, did the Lord God make coats of skins and clothed them. The positive Adam, with masculine reason uppermost, became male. The negative Eve, with feminine feeling predominant, became female. Eden, their state of divine consciousness, was lost to them, and they knew they were naked, in quotes.
Mm. Great reading. Their purity, to see themselves as souls encased in a wondrous triune body of consciousness, life force, and atomic radiation, was replaced by identification with the limitations of the gross physical form. Ever since the fall, their descendants, I love that they call it the fall. I think that's how we should refer to it.
With a
Ever
capital
since the fall,
F,
Yeah.
the grateful.
Ever since the fall, their descendants have had to reproduce their kind by the gross and complicated process of sexual creation. Adam and Eve, and through them, the human race, were required by cosmic law to be subject to the dualities of good and evil, and to experience death, painful change, because they had forfeited their omniscient immortality by reverting to animal habits.
Indeed. So this is the dualism that we are now part of, this world, dualism, life and death, everything that comes with it. And this knowledge of good and evil is the dualistic, this oppositional experience that mortals under Maya must undergo. This is what Sri Yukteswar is telling us, this promise to Eve by the serpent, this dualism that we're all living through and experiencing. And we could probably name them off the top of our heads, but that the life and death is probably the greatest one of all. Joy and sorrow, and what's the opposite of pain? But there's quite a few dualistic elements of nature, and I suppose, is it not inevitable in this world where free will is a thing? We have to experience this, and so this fall, capital F, into delusion through the misuse of feeling and reason, Sri Yukteswar says, really man relinquished the right to enter into the divine self-sufficiency, into the heavenly garden of divine self-sufficiency. And so really there's a balance between the feeling and reason that we're being given as the optimal. So Eve was convinced by the serpent, the idea of feeling in man, was convinced by the serpent to go after the forbidden fruit that God said, do not go after the sex sense. And Adam, consciousness, relinquished. So therefore there's no real balance in there. So the reason let us down, let's say. And so so did the feeling. And there's a couple of readings here actually we can jump into of Yogananda that he's given us, and Prank can kick us off with the first one.
Beyond the senses and intellect, intuition manifests in the calm consciousness as feeling, perceived mostly through the heart. When such feeling comes in meditation, you receive through it a definite sense of right direction and unshakable conviction. Increasingly, you will be able to recognize and follow this intuition. This doesn't mean you give up reason. Calm, impartial reason can also lead to intuition. Use common sense, but remember that arrogant or emotional reasoning leads to misconceptions and mistakes.
What do you think the world has more of today? Too much reason or too much feeling?
I feel like we kind of trust more than feeling. I feel like feeling is something that we find some people attribute it with being irrational and not founded in anything, whereas that's feeling. And reason, I think, is what, I mean, that's the classic way to look at the world materialistically, right? You can only believe in what you see. You have to, there's no knowledge that comes from above, or there is no higher being or something. Then, of course, reason sounds much better. But if you believe that there is a spiritual creator, then of course feeling is what you want. So I don't, like you said, Chris, there is no balance, and I think we're too far on the reason side.
If it was reason that was like pure wisdom, then that would be a good thing, wouldn't it? And if it was feeling that was guided like by pure love and selflessness and all the good stuff, that would be really good. But what I think we have right now is cold reason and erratic emotion, which is like the worst of both worlds, which then leads to chaos and wars and all that stuff. So we really need to refine, our capability to manifest these high qualities.
Indeed, the imbalance works both ways. And this, to sort of look to finish off this part of the book, we have, of the chapter in the book, we have the footnotes. So there's one footnote here, 18, and it's on the back of the comment from Yukteswar saying, Adam and Eve consciousness had relinquished the right to enter a heavenly garden of divine self-sufficiency. There's a couple of readings from Genesis and the Bible, 2:8 and 3:23. I'll get you guys to read it. Actually, Mike, can you kick us off?
2:8 is, therefore the Lord sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken.
And Prank.
The divine man, first made by God, had his consciousness centered in the omnipotent single eye in the forehead, eastward. The all creative powers of his will focused on that spot were lost to man when he began to till the ground of his physical nature. The personal responsibility of every human being is to restore his parents, or dual nature, to a unified harmony, or Eden.
I think that was, apologies, that was my editing. We overread there a little bit on the reading. But essentially, this Genesis part of the Bible tells us that man was made by God, where in the eastward part of Eden, in the he put man where whom he had formed, and really, Yogananda goes on to say, "Oh, this is the central point of the pineal gland in the seat of consciousness, is the Garden of Eden." So this is where we must keep our focus and concentration. Yeah, the finishing of the part of the chapter that we can look at is just as Priyank read out there. Personal responsibility, as Sri Yukteswar goes on to say, was the human being being responsible for the need to restore the parents or dual nature to unified harmony or Eden. So this is our responsibility in life, to restore our seat of consciousness and the balance with reason and feeling from heart and the pineal gland. And yeah, it's all laid out here for us. And to end his disclosure, Sri Yukteswar said to Mukunda that, sorry, Mukunda said to Sri Yukteswar, ending the discourse, that he, for the first time, felt a proper filial obligation towards Adam and Eve. And that would end the part and the chapter that we're going to read for now. And then we're going to look at the footnote here at the very end, 19, which is in and of itself, it's worthy of a whole episode, not because of the length of it, but because of the depth of what the information that it covers in it. And Mukunda here, as he's saying that he's expressing his deep appreciation for what Sri Yukteswar has actually given to him, and therefore us as well, of the interpretations of Genesis, interpretation of the Bible, the Adam and Eve story. And to me, I wanted to get your take on this. It was the first time that I'd been exposed to these concepts and ideas. I always knew that the Bible was going to be a little bit more than this literal interpretation, going to be more symbology and so on, but I'd never had it broken down to me in any which way. So when I first read this, it was like a real revelation to me. I really felt like, wow, this is I'm on the right track now. Here's people that truly, great saints, gurus, as I later would call them, my gurus, that really understand the concepts that were in the Bible and can translate them to me in a way that I can digest. Was it the same for you guys?
I find it so helpful that you grew up with a spiritual, religious framework, and then someone with divine knowledge comes pick you up. He picks you up from where you are and tries to lead you where you need to be. So a lot of the concept that I learned growing up suddenly had different meanings, but the right meanings, and then made more sense. So in that sense, it was incredibly helpful.
I too, Chris, found it deeply beneficial to read this interpretation as provided by Sri Yukteswar and then Paramahansa Yogananda, especially in this second coming of Christ, which goes into a bit more detail here. But this, this section where the made to till the soil. There's a really good section in God Talks with Arjuna, which is in chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, about how the fall of Adam and Eve and the descent into material consciousness and death, birth and death and repeated birth and death, is linked to the yugas as well. So like this emergence of the original purity of creation, and then going from causal to astral and the material form, and then symbolically then Adam and Eve were shown in this story, and then they indulged in the sex impulses, and then they descended through the yugas as well. Humanity descended through that indulgence, and then at some point then the inverse will happen and will ascend, which is where we are right now, as Mike and Chris mentioned earlier. And the other thing I wanted to quickly mention is here it says the personal responsibility of every human being is to restore his parents or dual nature to a unified harmony of Eden. His parents, in quotes, I think refers to our original parents, i.e. Adam and Eve. So our purpose is to restore our Adam nature and Eve nature to the unified harmony and heaven, which is Eden and which is obviously God.
Yeah. Profound truths and realizations in this chapter. We're going to really look in more detail this footnote. Mike's going to take us through in the next episode. But so far, it's been a real beautiful insight by Sri Yukteswar, and I empathize with Yogananda's appreciation for his master having given him this knowledge. So many of us have benefited from it since then. And for me, one of the greatest revelations in some way, because I was brought up Christian, quite frustrated actually with not really being able to understand the Bible because it is taken so literally by many, and it never made any sense to me. And so this was a real relief in some way to get the knowledge. But before we move on to look at the next episode, is there anything you guys think that we should be covering in addition to what we've done in this part? Or no, we've looked at it in good detail. So Mike, why don't we look at the footnote 19? What do we have to look forward to there?
Oh, quite a lot, actually. I mean, he first draws parallels between Hindu scriptures and the Genesis. So there is a book called the Hwari Purana, and we will basically get to discuss about the comments that he makes on this. Is super interesting. And then, of course, he goes into how the church over the decades, over the centuries, has made subtle changes to the Bible and how those are misleading, and we can talk about this. So it's a very interesting topic. Looking forward to that one.
You know, my mom is she's a Roman Catholic, she's Christian, and she loves reading through the Bible. We have conversations, and she's very open actually to talking about, you know, what we would believe and what we would know through Sri Yukteswar's knowledge in this part. So I'm going to see if she can listen to some of these episodes because they're so revealing, I think, and so lovely.
You're a brave soul, Chris.
I have a mother that loves me very much. I'll say that much. There's nothing that can tear us apart. But yeah, very much looking forward to that, Mike, for you to walk us through that next time. And to everyone listening and watching, thank you very much for joining, and look forward to being with you next time. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.